My husband believed his daughter's lies over my truth and kicked me out. 3 weeks later, he demanded an apology and compensation. I gave him divorce papers instead, and his daughter lost it. Hey, Reddit. I never thought I'd be the one posting here, but after everything that went down, I figured someone out there might need to hear this. It's a story about trust, lies, and what happens when the person you'd have done anything for decides you're the enemy. I'm not here for sympathy, just to share how I learned that sometimes the calmest revenge is walking away and never looking back. If you had asked me, Dorothy, 44, female, a year ago, who the most loyal person in my life was, I would have said my husband, Max, without even thinking. We met when I was rebuilding my life, trying to get my business off the ground after a financial mess. When things got rough, he was the one who told me not to quit, who loaned me money from his savings without hesitation. I used to tell people I hit the jackpot marrying him. Then there was his daughter, 18 years old, and living with us. I'll call her Maya. At first, I really tried. I took her out for dinner when she aced an exam, helped her get a part-time job, even taught her to drive. She'd smile and thank me, but there was always that distance, like she was playing polite for her dad's sake. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at me with this blank look, and when I'd ask if something was wrong, she'd just shrug and say, "You're not my mom." I brushed it off. I figured it was normal for a young adult to feel weird about a stepmom stepping in, but she didn't come around. She grew colder, ruder. She'd roll her eyes when I talked, interrupt me mid-sentence, make small digs like, "Mom wouldn't have done it that way." And Max, instead of calling her out, started defending her. "She's just stressed, Dorothy," he'd say. "Don't take it personally." Then came that night. It was a Thursday. I remember because I'd just come home from a long client meeting and the house was unusually quiet. I walked in and found Max sitting on the couch, his hands clenched, eyes glassy. Maya was standing near the wall, pretending to look scared, but with that same fake innocence I'd seen 100 times before. Max looked up at me and said, "We need to talk." His tone didn't sound like my husband's. It was flat, formal. My stomach dropped. "What's going on?" I asked. Maya started tearing up, voice trembling like she had rehearsed it. "I just can't live here anymore. She made me uncomfortable. What she did to me, it's not right." For a second, I actually thought I misheard her. "What?" I said quietly. Max stood up. "Is that true, Dorothy?" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so unreal. "Max, are you serious right now? You think I—" Before I could even finish, he slapped me hard. My cheek burned, my ears rang. His voice shook with rage. "How could you? How could you even think about doing that to my daughter?" I just stood there staring at him, feeling everything inside me collapse. "I didn't do anything," I said quietly. "She's lying." But Max wasn't hearing me. He stepped back, pointing toward the hallway. "Pack your things. You're leaving tonight." "Max," I said, still holding my face. "I didn't touch her. I swear to you, she's trying to start something." He shook his head, eyes filled with disgust that didn't even look like his anymore. "I don't want to hear it." Maya let out this shaky sob like she was in a bad drama. Max rushed to hug her, and I watched from across the room, frozen. The two of them stood there like I was some monster. "Please, Max." I tried again, softer this time. "We've been together for years. You know me. You know me." But he didn't. Not in that moment. His voice came out like ice. "You need to go before I call someone to make you leave." I stared at him for a long second, waiting for something to break. Some flicker of doubt, some sign that he realized what he was doing. Nothing came, so I walked down the hall, pulled my suitcase from the closet, and started packing. My hands were shaking so bad I kept dropping things. I knew I had the right to stay, but I left to avoid giving them anything to twist. When I turned to leave, he was standing by the door, arms crossed, refusing to look at me. Maya stood a few feet behind him, still pretending to cry, but with the faintest smirk on her face. That image stuck in my head, her fake tears and that small, satisfied smile. I stepped outside, and before I could close the door, Max said one last thing. "Don't contact us again." The door slammed. The sound of it echoed all the way down the street as I stood there in the dark, suitcase by my feet, realizing my marriage, everything I thought was solid, had just ended in one lie. And as I walked away from that house, all I could think was, he didn't even ask. No questions, no hesitation, no, tell me your side, just judgment. I kept walking until my legs burned, the cold night air drying the last bit of warmth I had left in me. I didn't even know where I was going, just anywhere that wasn't there. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I landed on one name, Derek, my friend. I hadn't talked to him in a while, but I knew if there was one person I could count on, it was him. He picked up on the second ring. Dorothy? His voice was half asleep. Yeah, I said, my voice barely steady. I need a place to stay, just for a few days. He didn't ask why, didn't hesitate. Come over, door's open. That's all he said, simple, solid. I showed up at his apartment about half an hour later, carrying my half-filled suitcase and whatever was left of my pride. When I walked in, he was sitting on the couch, no questions on his face, just quiet concern. He pointed to the cushions. Sit, you look like hell. I dropped the suitcase and sat down. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Everything in my head was tangled. I didn't even know how to start. Finally, I said, Max kicked me out. Derek frowned. Why? You two fight? He thinks I did something to his daughter. The words felt poisonous just saying them out loud. He stared at me for a second, trying to process it. What? She said I made her uncomfortable. Said I did something inappropriate. I shook my head, staring at the floor. I didn't. You know I wouldn't. The silence stretched for a second, and I could feel my chest tightening. I was waiting for it. The doubt. The look people get when they think they're hiding judgment, but you can see it anyway. I started panicking, but Derek just sighed and leaned back. Dorothy, stop shaking. I believe you. I looked up at him, almost not believing what I'd heard. You don't even need to think about it? He nodded. I've known you since high school. You're a lot of things. Stubborn, quiet, sometimes too patient for your own good. But not that, not ever. Something in me cracked right then. I hadn't realized how desperate I was to hear those words until they came out of his mouth. I nodded, staring at the floor, swallowing the lump in my throat. He got up and went to the kitchen. Couch is yours. Sheets are clean. You can stay as long as you need. That night I barely slept. My head kept looping the same thought. He didn't even ask. The next morning, I woke up early, staring at the ceiling. I checked my phone out of habit. One message from Max. Just 4 words. You're a monster. That hit harder than the slap. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. By noon, Derek was already up for work. But before leaving, he put a sticky note on the counter. Don't sit in this forever. Fix it. That's when I decided I needed to know what I was really dealing with. Not emotionally, but legally. If Max was serious about cutting me out, I needed to protect myself. I found a small law office nearby and made an appointment. The lawyer, a middle-aged guy named Nate, listened while I explained everything. The accusation, the eviction, the silence. He didn't flinch. When I finished, he opened a file and asked, Do you know whose name is on the house deed? Both, I said. We bought it together. He nodded. And the business? The one he registered under his name? Half of it's mine, I said quickly. I helped him start it. He tapped his pen thoughtfully. Do you have proof of any of that? I kept receipts, bank transfers, emails. He looked up. Good. Keep them safe. You have rights here, Dorothy. You're not walking away empty-handed. Something about that sentence made me breathe for the first time in days. For a while, I'd been walking around like I'd lost everything. My home, my husband, my reputation. But now, for the first time, I felt a flicker of control. When I got back, Derek was sitting on the balcony with coffee. He looked at me, searching my face. You okay? I went to see a lawyer, I said. Turns out he can't just erase me. I still have rights to the house and the business. He nodded slowly. Good. You needed to hear that. I sat beside him, staring out at the street. He told me not to contact them, I said quietly. And now they're telling people I'm a threat. Let them talk, Derek said. Truth has legs, lies don't. I didn't answer, but for the first time in days, I actually believed that. That night, I stayed up again, but not from fear, from thought. I opened my laptop, started sorting through folders, finding every proof, every receipt, every record that tied me to what we built. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was a plan. Because if he wasn't going to give me a chance to defend myself, I'd make sure he'd regret not letting me speak. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Derek went to work early, and I spent my time cleaning up my side of things, sorting through documents, printing out records, and checking bank statements. Every time I looked at my phone, I half expected a text from him saying he wanted to talk, but the screen stayed empty. Then one afternoon, Derek walked into the living room holding his phone. "You should see this," he said carefully. He handed it to me, and there it was, a post from Maya, my stepdaughter. A picture of her smiling at a cafe, captioned, "Finally, safe from my stepmom." Some women hide their true colors well. No names, no tags, but everyone in our town would know exactly who she meant. I stared at it for a long time. My first instinct was to comment, to shout the truth into the void, but Derek stopped me. "Don't," he said. "You reply once and you look guilty. Let your lawyer handle it." He was right. I called Nate, explained everything, and by the end of the day, a cease and desist letter was sent directly to Max's email. The post vanished within 24 hours, but it didn't matter. The damage was already done. My phone started buzzing with texts from people I hadn't talked to in months. Some were polite, pretending they were just checking in. Others went straight to it, asking if I'd done something inappropriate. I could feel the judgment hiding between every word. The next morning, I went out to grab coffee. The barista, someone who used to chat with me every morning, barely made eye contact. Two regulars at the corner table stopped talking when I walked by. That silent, heavy kind of attention followed me everywhere. By the end of the week, I had to delete my social media altogether. I couldn't look at the whispers anymore. Every time I opened a feed, I saw people liking Maya's photos or leaving little comments like, "Proud of you for speaking out." It was like being erased while still existing. A few nights later, Derek came home to find me sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. "You're not going to win this online," he said quietly. "I'm not trying to," I answered. "But she's winning out there." He sat down across from me. "Then win where it actually matters." I nodded, and that's when I decided I was done waiting. I met Nate again the next morning. We talked about filing for divorce formally, but he said something that stuck with me. "Don't rush it emotionally. Build your foundation first, then act." So I waited. I documented every message, every deleted post, every screenshot I could find. I kept my hands clean, my responses legal, my tone cold. And then about 2 weeks later, Max showed up. It was a Saturday. There was a hard knock on the door. Not polite, more like someone trying to prove they still had control. When I opened it, Max was standing there, arms crossed, jaw tight. He didn't look calm. He looked like he'd practiced this visit in his head 100 times. "Are you really not going to fix what you did?" he said. No greeting, no hesitation. Before I could even answer, he walked in on his own, eyes darting around the small apartment like he was trying to remind himself he was the victim walking into the criminal's space. He didn't sit right away. He just stood there, clutching his phone like a shield. "You've been ignoring me," he said sharply. "After everything you did, you could at least have the decency to face it." "I've had nothing to say," I answered, keeping my voice even. That stopped him for a second. He looked at me like I'd just insulted his existence. Then he straightened his shoulders, ready to start the real performance. He folded his hands. "Look, Dorothy, we can put this behind us. I've had time to think, and I'm willing to reconsider everything, but there has to be accountability." "Accountability?" I repeated. He nodded like he was explaining something obvious. "Yes, for what you did. I think it would help Maya heal if you apologized and maybe provided some compensation for the emotional distress you caused her." For a second, I just stared at him, trying to process the words. He was sitting there, calm as ever, talking about compensation like he was negotiating a refund. I didn't answer. He took my silence as defiance. His eyes narrowed. "You can't just walk away from this, Dorothy. You can't pretend you didn't cause pain. You think running from it makes you innocent?" That was it. The mask slipped. The gentle tone was gone. His voice rose, sharp and brittle. "You're manipulative. You know that? You're hiding like a coward." I waited for him to finish. When he finally stopped, breathing hard, I stood up, walked to the table, and picked up a sealed envelope I'd prepared days ago. I walked back to him and placed it on the coffee table. "What's this?" he asked. "Divorce papers," I said. The color drained from his face. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." His calm broke completely. "You're trying to destroy everything. You're going to ruin us both. You did that the night you believed a lie over me." For a moment, he just stood there frozen. Then he grabbed his phone, muttered something under his breath, and stormed out. The door slammed so hard it rattled the frame. I stood in silence for a long time after that. For once, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel broken. I felt steady. That was the moment I realized something had shifted. I wasn't begging for him to believe me anymore. I wasn't waiting for him to come to his senses. He'd made his choice. And now I was finally making mine. The next morning, I called Nate and told him to go ahead, file the divorce officially. No more half measures, no symbolic envelopes, no waiting around for him to come to his senses. I wanted it done legally and cleanly. He scheduled a meeting for the afternoon, and I showed up with a backpack full of proof. Receipts, old invoices, business transfers, everything that tied my name to his on paper. When I laid it all out on the table, Nate gave a small nod. "You've got more documentation than most people bring in a year. This will hold." I watched as he organized it into neat piles, labeling each one. "The business," he said, tapping a folder, "is a 50-50 split. You funded him, worked in it, and your names are on the accounts. He can't deny that." It wasn't satisfying yet, but it was something. I left that office knowing I had a plan, something solid that wasn't built on begging or emotion. By the end of the week, Max was officially served. The papers went out, and for the first time, the silence broke. My phone lit up with messages one after another. "How could you do this to me? You're ruining my life. We can still fix this if you stop now." I didn't reply, not a single word. He must have realized I wasn't biting because the messages turned uglier. "You'll regret this. You think anyone will believe your side? Still nothing from me." 3 days later, he called 11 times in one afternoon. I let it ring every time. That's when I heard it, a sharp knock on the door. I didn't even have to look. I knew it was him. When I opened it, he was standing there in full performance mode. Red eyes, trembling lip, one hand on his chest like he was auditioning for pity. "You're destroying everything," he said the moment I appeared. "We built a life together, Dorothy. You can't just throw it away because you're angry." "I'm not angry," I said flatly. "I'm done." He stepped closer, his voice dropping lower. "Then stop the divorce. Please think about what we had. Think about the house, the business, about me." His tone softened, just enough to sound desperate, but I could see the gears turning behind his eyes. This wasn't love, it was damage control. "You made your decision the night you threw me out," I said quietly. "You didn't ask questions then. Don't ask now." He stared at me for a second, disbelief flickering across his face. And then, just like that, the fake calm shattered. "You're doing this to punish me," he shouted. "You're ruining my daughter's life, mine too. You think this makes you innocent?" I didn't move. "You ruined your own life, Max." His breathing got shallow, eyes wild. Then he screamed, sharp and sudden, "You hit me." The words sliced through the room like glass. For a split second, I just stood there, stunned. My hands were at my sides. I hadn't even taken a step toward him. He shouted again, louder, like he wanted the neighbors to hear. "You hit me!" And that's when I heard a door open behind me. Derek stepped out of his room, eyes focused. He froze for only a second before saying, calm and steady, "No, she didn't. I saw everything. You're lying." Max's face drained of color instantly. He hadn't known Derek was home. The room went quiet except for his breathing. "You need to leave," Derek said firmly. "Now." Max looked between us. Me standing still. Derek glaring. And for the first time since this all started, he didn't have a script. His lips trembled, then twisted into something bitter. "You'll regret this," he hissed, voice shaking. I didn't reply. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. The silence after was thick. Derek rubbed his face and sighed. "He's losing control. Don't be alone with him again. That was risky." "I won't," I said quietly. I grabbed my phone, opened the recorder app, and dictated everything that had just happened. Time, date, exact words. Then I sent it straight to Nate with a short note. He tried to accuse me of hitting him. Derek witnessed it. The reply came within minutes. "Good move. Keep documenting everything. Don't open that door again without me or the police on standby. The next day, I met with Nate again. He added Derek's statement to my case file. He looked up from his notes and said, "He's trying to bait you. Don't give him anything. Let him dig his own hole." So that's what I did. By the end of the month, Nate called. "Everything's filed and accepted. The court date is confirmed." He explained that the county court moved fast on uncontested property cases. No kids involved. No ongoing disputes. He'd also negotiated a partial settlement with Max's side before the hearing, so the judge agreed to an expedited schedule. That night, I sat at my desk, the apartment silent except for the hum of the ceiling fan. I looked at the neatly stacked folders in front of me. A month of effort, every document sharp and ready. My phone buzzed. A text from Nate. Court date, 14th. Be ready. I stared at the message, then typed back one line. I've been ready since the night he lied. Then I leaned back in my chair, exhaled slowly, and whispered to myself, let's see who still lies when it's under oath. 2 weeks later, that day came. The courthouse looked smaller than I expected. I sat with Nate at the front bench, files stacked neatly between us. Across the aisle, Max walked in. He looked like he was walking onto a stage. He didn't even look at me. He just walked straight to his seat, pretending I didn't exist. Behind him sat Maya, arms folded tight across her chest, glare sharp enough to cut glass. Nate leaned closer. Stay calm. Let the documents do the talking. I nodded once. I didn't plan on saying much anyway. Nate had already filed a motion about Max's earlier misconduct. He'd submitted a sworn declaration full of false statements and ignored discovery deadlines. The judge had already warned him once about wasting the court's time. The judge entered, firm voice calling for everyone to rise. The proceedings started fast. Nate opened with a short statement outlining the marriage, the joint business, and the contributions I'd made. He placed a folder on the desk and said, Your Honor, this file contains direct evidence of Mrs. Hayes' involvement in all financial and operational aspects of the business. He opened it like he'd been rehearsing for weeks. Inside were receipts, bank statements, signed transfers, all bearing both our names. When the judge turned to Max, asking if he had any objections, he smiled faintly, confident at first. That business was mine. She just helped here and there, he said. Helped? Nate asked. You mean the funding, contracts, web management, and rent payments she covered from her personal account? Max hesitated. That was temporary support. Temporary? Nate repeated, holding up another page. This transfer here, a $10,000 investment marked as a capital contribution, signed by you. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Hayes, that doesn't sound temporary. Max's mouth opened, but nothing came out. For the first time since I'd walked in, I saw his mask shift. We moved to the next part, the home and assets. Nate presented the mortgage statements showing both signatures. Every time Max tried to interrupt, the judge stopped him. Mr. Hayes, the judge said sharply at one point, if you can't provide evidence to the contrary, let's proceed with what's documented. His fake confidence began to crumble. His hand trembled when he reached for his water. At one point he muttered, She's doing this out of revenge. And the judge replied calmly, I don't see revenge here. I see paperwork. Behind him, I could see Maya glaring, whispering things into her father's ear every few minutes. She looked furious, restless, like she was waiting for a chance to lash out. When Nate presented the emails, exchanges between me and Max discussing his business plans, he tried to play dumb. I don't recall writing those. Nate printed one enlarged copy and read it aloud. You've done so much for this business, Dorothy. I couldn't have started without you. That's your email address, Mr. Hayes? He froze. Yes, but that was before she turned on me. The judge didn't even respond. He just made a note. By the time the evidence list ended, the courtroom felt colder. Nate leaned back, confident, while Max kept his eyes on the desk, pretending to flip through papers that didn't matter anymore. Then the judge asked one final question. Mr. Hayes, did you or did you not remove your wife from the marital home without any proof of wrongdoing? His voice cracked. I had to protect my daughter. From what? The judge asked. You admitted under oath there was no police report, no investigation, and no witnesses, correct? Max's lips parted, but no sound came out. The silence said enough. We'll take a short recess before I issue my preliminary ruling. The judge stepped out, saying he'd take it under advisement and set a date for the following week. When he left, the room went quiet, except for Maya whispering fast, panicked. Max rubbed his temples, shaking his head. For once, he didn't look angry. He looked small. I stood up and walked out into the hallway, feeling every ounce of tension drain out of me. It wasn't victory yet, but it was close enough to taste. I was standing by the stairs when I heard quick footsteps behind me. Maya's voice cut through the air like nails on glass. "You think you've won?" I turned slowly. She was glaring at me, shaking with anger. "You're pathetic," she spat. "You ruined everything. You took everything from him." I didn't move. I didn't even flinch. She took a step closer. "You're greedy. You never loved him. You just wanted the money." I looked at her for a long moment before answering, calm and steady. "Funny, I'm not the one who lied to ruin a marriage." That shut her up. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The confidence that always filled her eyes flickered for the first time. She turned sharply and walked away, her heels clacking down the steps until the sound faded. I stood there breathing slow. Nate walked out a few minutes later, phone in hand. "Judge will finalize next week," he said. "Looks good for you. You handled that perfectly." I nodded. I didn't have to handle anything. The truth handled itself. As we walked down the courthouse steps, I saw Max through the glass door, still sitting there, shoulders slumped, face pale. For years, I thought silence was weakness, that staying calm meant losing. But standing there that day, I realized something different. Silence wasn't surrender. It was control. And for the first time since the night he threw me out, I finally had all of it. The following week felt strangely calm. Nate told me the judge's final ruling would be delivered soon, but I already knew which way it was going. The evidence was overwhelming. The silence from Max's side was even louder. Then the fallout started. It began small, like cracks in a wall. A friend from our old neighborhood messaged me saying, "People are asking questions about his posts. Someone mentioned there's no proof of anything." I didn't respond, but I saved the message. A few days later, screenshots from Maya's old posts started circulating again, the ones she thought she'd deleted months ago. Someone found them through archive pages, reposting them in community groups with captions like, "Didn't this girl accuse her stepmom? Why is the court saying something else?" The narrative flipped almost overnight. The same people who used to avoid me were suddenly silent. Some even reached out privately with awkward apologies. Then came the real explosion. Apparently, one of Maya's friends, someone she'd bragged to, leaked a series of messages. In them, Maya admitted that she might have exaggerated things about me because she couldn't stand how much control I had in the house. The screenshots spread fast. Every word was time-stamped. Every excuse was gone. Nate called me that morning. "Don't comment publicly," he said. "Let the truth breathe on its own." I didn't plan to. Watching it happen was enough. Max's business took the first hit. Clients started pulling out of contracts, citing personal reputation concerns. By the end of the week, his company's social media page was flooded with questions. Not hateful ones, just cold, factual curiosity. "Did you really lie about your wife?" He tried posting a vague statement about misunderstandings, but it only made things worse. People had already seen the leaked messages. There was no coming back from that. One evening, Derek and I were eating dinner when a mutual acquaintance sent me a video clip. It showed Max and Maya leaving a small cafe mid-argument. Max's voice carried loud and clear, "You ruined everything. You and your mouth." Maya fired back, "You believed me. You didn't even ask her what happened." The video ended with Max shouting, "Because you cried." I just put the phone down. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like justice finally caught up to them. By the time we reached the final property hearing, part of the expedited process, things were already over in every way that mattered. Max walked in looking smaller, drained. He didn't even look at me. Maya sat behind him again, but she wasn't glaring anymore. She looked restless, hollow, like she didn't want to be there. The judge went over everything in a steady voice. The financial records, the verified evidence, the lack of proof for any of his accusations, and my verified role as co-owner of the business. "Therefore," the judge said, "the court finds that the business constitutes marital property and awards Mrs. Hayes 50% of its total value, including related assets. Additionally, Mr. Hayes is ordered to cover Mrs. Hayes's legal fees due to his prior false declaration and failure to comply with discovery requests." Max's shoulders slumped. Maya's face went pale. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even look their way. I just nodded at Nate and started gathering my papers. Behind me, I could hear Maya whispering something sharp, and then the sound of her chair scraping as she stood up and stormed out of the courtroom. The door slammed hard enough to make the judge sigh. Max stayed seated, frozen, staring down at the documents in front of him. For a moment, I thought he might speak. He didn't. He just stared, maybe at the numbers, maybe at himself. A few weeks later, word got around that the house was listed for sale under the court's order. The judge ruled that selling it was the only fair way to divide the value evenly. Max had no choice but to comply. The business he'd fought so hard to claim alone was split down the middle. Half its profits and assets transferred to me through the court's enforcement. Not long after, Maya moved out. Apparently, they'd had another major fight, this time about money. A friend of a friend told me Max screamed that she'd ruined his entire life, and Maya yelled back that he should have known better than to believe everything. That was the last I heard about them for a while. Meanwhile, my name was cleared everywhere that mattered. The court's ruling was public record. The same community that had quietly judged me now had written proof of my innocence. I started getting messages from old clients again. Short, cautious, respectful ones. Glad things got sorted, Dorothy. Knew you weren't that kind of person. I didn't reply to most of them. I didn't need their approval anymore. By the end of that month, the money from the settlement hit my account. The business split and the fee award. The house proceeds would come later once the sale closed. Max had lost his reputation, his business, and his daughter's respect. And I'd lost none of that. I'd only lost illusions. And that I could live without. Months passed, and the noise faded with time. The messages stopped. The whispers disappeared. The lawyers closed their files. It was strange how quickly chaos could turn into quiet. Once the truth settled, life became still enough to breathe again. Then one evening, there was a knock on my door. It wasn't aggressive, not the kind that made you tense, just soft, hesitant. I almost didn't answer, but something in the rhythm made me stand. When I opened it, Max was standing there. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. His hair was thinner, his clothes loose, his face older, like the weight of everything had finally caught up. His shoulders drooped, and his eyes were red-rimmed, not from anger this time, but exhaustion. "Hi," he said quietly. I didn't move. I just held the door open halfway. "You shouldn't be here," I said flatly. "I know," he replied. "I just needed to see you." He took a breath, voice cracking. "I'm not here for money or property. I don't want anything from you." He looked down, twisting his hands. "I just came to ask for your forgiveness." The words hung in the air, heavy and strange. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it felt to hear that word from him after everything. Forgiveness. He kept talking. "I know you have no reason to." He swallowed hard. "Unforgivable. But I can't live with the thought that you hate me. I just want peace. Dorothy, please." His eyes filled with tears. He took a small step closer, but I didn't move. I just stood still, remembering that night he didn't even let me speak. The slap, the accusation, the way he looked at me like I was filth. When he finally stopped talking, I spoke quietly, my voice steady. "Why would I give you another chance through forgiveness," I said, "when you never gave me one to explain myself?" He stared at me, tears spilling down his cheeks. "I was scared," he whispered. "I thought I was protecting her." "Protecting her from what?" I asked. "The woman who took care of her? The one who fixed her car, her college applications, her life?" He shook his head, crying harder. "I didn't know what to believe. You didn't care what was true," I interrupted. He covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking. "I've lost everything, Dorothy. My daughter won't talk to me. The house is gone. The business is falling apart. I just want to make peace with you." I let out a slow breath. Peace starts with truth, not guilt. He looked up, eyes red, breathing uneven. "Then tell me what to do." I shook my head. "You already did everything. That's the problem." We stood there in silence. The hallway light flickered once, and for a moment it felt like time froze. Finally, I said, "You should go." He opened his mouth to speak, but didn't. He just nodded, wiped his tears with the back of his hand, and turned toward the elevator. When the doors closed behind him, I stood there for a few seconds longer before closing the door, slowly, without anger, just finality. That night, I opened a small box I'd kept tucked away in the back of the closet. Inside were the last traces of that old life, the wedding ring, a few old pictures, the house keys. I drove out to the river, parked near the edge, and stood there under the cold night air. I opened the box, looked at everything one last time, and without hesitation, threw it all into the water. The splash was quiet, barely there, but it sounded final. The ring sank first, then the pictures drifted apart, the keys disappearing beneath the ripples. I watched until the surface went still again. When I got back home, I locked the door, turned off the lights, and sat in silence. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. No ghosts, no noise, no weight, just peace. And I realized that real revenge isn't about making someone else suffer. It's about making sure they never have power over you again. And I had finally done that.